Hi, everyone. This is Joe Firestone for Empowering Democracy. And tonight, I want to start off with an announcement or two. First, as you may know, if you've been here before, there was a technical glitch with the stream last night. It only lasted for about a minute and a half. Okay, I will redo that stream tomorrow night, okay, at 9. I am not immediately redoing it because Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights are Dump the Corruption nights on Empowering Democracy. And Tuesday and Thursday deal, okay, with other issues. Hello, Kay. Thank you for wondering whether Bonnie and I were all right last night. We were all right. There was just a technical problem that ended the stream very prematurely. So, oh, so Lana says, howdy, don't forget to put the link to your book somewhere here so people can order. Thank you, Lana. Thank you. I must ask, though, which book are you talking about? I have written 7 ebooks, okay, on MMT. So I think I know which book, but I just want to verify it. Okay, so my topic for tonight is the promise of the $100 trillion coin. Now, as far as I know, the $100 trillion coin was not my idea. I had been advocating for a $60 trillion coin, but in um, an exchange with Joe Wiesenthal, then of the Business Insider, the $100 trillion coin was suggested half in jest by Stephanie Kelton. So I must give Stephanie Kelton due credit for suggesting that. Okay, but anyway, I have been talking in recent broadcasts about the situation. Okay, fair enough, Lana. Uh, okay, I have been talking about the discussion about the $1 trillion coin. I pointed out on Tuesday that the $1 trillion coin might not work because it may not be large enough, but to avoid having another debt ceiling crisis sometime in August and September. Okay, I also suggested that if the objective was to end debt ceiling crises altogether, that I didn't think the $1 trillion coin was going to work. That one needed coins, okay, of larger denomination. Of course, by now it should be clear to all of you who have been following me that the difference between a $1 trillion coin and a $50,000 coin, okay, and a $50 million coin and a $5 million coin is just the face value of the coin that is ordered by the Secretary of the Treasury when she or he places their order for a platinum coin, for a 1 ounce platinum coin with the mint. That's the only difference. The design of the coin is the same. The weight of the coin is the same. All that's different is the specification of the face value of the coin. So there's very little difference. If a $50,000 coin can be minted, if if a $100 billion coin can be minted, if a $500 billion coin can be minted, if a $1 trillion coin can be minted, then a $100 trillion coin or a $1 quadrillion coin can also be minted. The face value of the coin is up to the decision of the Secretary of the Treasury. So you have to make that clear. Now, in talking about the promise of the $100 trillion coin, I also sometimes use the term high value platinum coin seigniorage, abbreviated by HVPCS. So, what exactly is high value platinum coin seigniorage? The answer is that it's the seigniorage from coins that are above a certain arbitrarily specified value. When I first started talking about this, I was talking about a $30 trillion coin. So let us say 30 trillion and above is high value platinum coin seigniorage. That's arbitrary, of course. Some people might want to say it's 20 trillion and above or 15 trillion and above, but it certainly isn't 1 trillion or 5 trillion. It must be sufficient at least to pay off the national debt, and to also take care of any deficit spending for some years to come. So that's a fairly arbitrary specification, but I'm going to visit it here. I want to talk about the promise of high value platinum coin seigniorage. Okay, and specifically, I want to talk about the promise, okay, of the $100 trillion coin. The immediate promise. Oh, I should say also a couple of things. Start. We're waiting for Greg Mallard to come back. He was working a fair number of hours today, so he is better. But he was working very late, and I don't know if he'll have the time to come in here today. When I went on the 8 o'clock program, Around the World with Brandy and Dee, he was not yet available to come on. So I don't expect him. Okay. I expect, however, Dolores Pierce may be joining me for this discussion. But it can be that I'll be the only one who'll be giving discussion. Okay, other than people attending this stream, who, of course, I do hope will comment, okay, on everything. So to start my main statement, the immediate promise of HVPCS for America, of course, is the end of austerity politics, periodic debt ceiling crises, fiscal cliffs, sequesters, and budget crises. HVPCS directly ends debt ceiling crises because the debt is no longer relevant except as a constantly shrinking obligation that will be paid off as it falls due. In other words, when each bond falls due, it will be paid off by the Treasury. As for fiscal cliffs, sequesters, and budget crises, their justification is primarily in the false claim that the United States is running out of money and must slow the growth of the national debt enough to allow the debt to GDP ratio to shrink so that we can't afford to implement the deficit spending that may be necessary to create full employment, pass Medicare for all or a national health service bill, and do other things that a majority of the population supports heavily but does not insist upon in the face of supposed budget problems. There would be no fiscal cliff, sequesters, or budget crises without the claim that there is a government budget constraint, also known as a GBC. Once we dispel that claim with HVPCS, these things will be gone with the wind, and a new set of hopefully more fruitful problems will emerge. I look forward to these new problems. They will be a great step forward for American democracy. And of course, this program is all about empowering democracy. The longer term promise of HVPCS for America is the same as the promise of MMT based policies for America that may require substantial deficit spending, because HVPCS will enable the government, including Congress and the executive, to put neoliberal austerity policies aside and begin to legislate MMT-based policies for public purpose. The policies could involve deficit spending or not, depending on whether full employment exists. And what is full employment? Full employment exists when no one is out there who wants a job but cannot get one. It's quite simple. If full employment exists, then the various programs would be, quote, paid for. Of course, we know they're not really paid for, from taxes. Okay, let's say that the various programs would be offset by taxes. At full employment, tax revenues will be much greater than today. I've already defined full employment. According to it, I don't know, we probably have, at this point, this is a rough estimate, perhaps still 8 to 10 million people, who are unemployed or actually disemployed. So there's plenty of policy space for deficit spending, yet these policies would include, but not be limited to, the following: payroll tax holidays. The payroll tax holiday for both employers and employees would give a couple each earning $50,000 in wages about $650 a month in increased consumption power. It would last until full employment in the private sector is reached, when the FICA tax, the payroll tax, would be reimposed. This measure would be an enormous immediate augmentation to consumption power. It would be felt immediately and would have a fiscal multiplier, at least a primary fiscal multiplier, of at least $1.30 for every federal dollar expended. It would be implemented through the government crediting the Social Security, quote, trust fund, okay, accounts with the forgiven FICA taxes, and would add about $650 billion to the private sector if it took a year to reach true full employment. Here's another way. You could also augment the consumption power of people through the child tax credit that was given for a very short time by the American Rescue Plan in 2021. Unfortunately, the administration did not vigorously move to make that a permanent tax credit. Okay, as it might have done if it had simply made it permanent in the American Rescue Plan and dared anybody to vote against it. That would certainly have been very interesting. A third way to increase consumption, of course, would be to use a basic income. Well, I should say to increase consumption power. It would be to use a basic income. However, if we're looking at a panoply, okay, of policies, and as you'll see in a few moments, if we're looking at having a job guarantee available, then it is likely that a basic income policy would be some proportion of a job guarantee. I'll call it a social wage here. I'm not even going to call it, okay, a living wage. What I'm going to say is we could have a federal job guarantee wage, which would be the de facto minimum wage, which would not simply be a living wage, but a social wage. A social wage is a living wage plus enough funds to allow job guarantee workers to fully participate in our society. So that will be more than even a living wage. But I'll come to that in just a minute. Here I want to say that a basic income, to avoid it being inflationary, should probably be roughly about two-thirds of the job guarantee wage. At least that's what I'm proposing, okay, at this point. But if someone wanted to make it three-quarters of the job guarantee wage, then certainly with high-value platinum coin seigniorage, we could afford it. It's probably wise not to do that. Oh, by the way, someone has now joined me, and that is Dee.
Hi,
Hello.
John. I looked up in the corner to make sure you were live.
I am live this time, right?
That's great.
Okay, D. Piers is here joining me, having finished her show on Around the World with Brandy. Okay, and D, of course, is the co-host of Around the World. Okay, with Brandy and D. So D, what we've been talking about here is the promise of the $100 trillion coin, or as I sometimes call it, a little more generally, high value platinum coin seigniorage. Here I'm saying that anything above a $30 trillion coin, uh, I would perhaps refer to as high value platinum coin seigniorage. Okay, I prefer the $100 trillion coin or the quadrillion-dollar coin. However, and what I'm trying to outline here is the benefits that could flow from a policy environment where $100 trillion in the Treasury General Account would be sitting. I'm supposing or postulating that the presence of that kind of money in the Treasury General Account would eliminate the whole austerity ideology. That we wouldn't have to cope with the austerity mongers anymore. We wouldn't have to cope with fiscal cliffs. We would not have to cope with trying to reduce the deficit. We would not have to cope with not doing things we want to do out of fear that the federal government could not afford it. The minting of the $100 trillion coin would be absolute evidence that the federal government can afford it if Congress wants to legislate it. So I've been going through various policy measures, and when you came in, I was talking about things like a basic income. Okay, specifically about a basic income, and I was making the point that I would propose that the basic income be roughly two-thirds of a the minimum social wage. Okay, now a social wage is a living wage plus the amount of money necessary for a person to fully participate in society. Okay, and the reason why a basic income should be two-thirds of that, okay, is because to set a basic income as equal to a social wage, as some might propose, is likely to be inflationary. And here I refer to research done by the MMTers, okay, and in particular Pavlina Cherneva, which seem to show uh, that if a basic income were equal to a social wage or to a living wage, that would be inflationary.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, moving to something else that could be done, of course. We could forgive student debt or cancel student debt. I don't even want to say forgive, cancel student debt in a New York second. It won't even amount to anything significant because since most of the debt is owned by the government could simply cancel the debt, and that would not result in a material reduction of government assets due to the effect of the high value platinum coin of $100 trillion having augmented those assets considerably. And for the student debt that is not owned by the government, which is a fairly small percentage right now, something like 90 to 95% of the outstanding student debt, that debt could be bought by the government and then canceled by the government. So 100% of student debt could then be canceled by the government,
Right.
something that would be greatly facilitated by having $100 trillion in the Treasury General Account, or almost $100 trillion. Now, one thing, when the economy was down, and people are predicting that we're about to enter a recession, I don't really think we are, but if those who are predicting it are correct, then we would have unemployment that was much higher than we have now. And we would have also state revenue coming in that would be far less, okay, than it is now. And so, okay, an MMT policy that has been favored in the past has been revenue sharing with the state governments. Okay, and a proposal originally suggested by some of the MMT researchers is as follows. The government would provide a one-time grant of $1,000 per person to the states for rehiring state government employees who were laid off during a recession. The fiscal multiplier from this isn't clear, but since most state employees are middle class, the primary fiscal multiplier will probably be in the range of 1.20, provided the subsidy, the grant, is to be funded through deficit spending using HVPCS. This program, after filtering through the state governments, would add about $315 billion to the private sector before the effect of the multiplier is felt. So if you went through primary, secondary, and tertiary fiscal multipliers, you might well be approaching adding about $500 billion to the private sector. Of course, one of the favorites, perhaps the favorite of the MMT programs, advocated by MMT people such as myself, is the JG program, Job Guarantee Program. The Job Guarantee Program, and here's the way the MMT proposal is usually phrased, is as a job offer at a living wage with standard fringe benefits, including access to Medicare for those who want to work full time and haven't found work available in the private sector. The way I put this is that the JG program guarantees a job offer at a social wage, also cost adjusted for the CPI in your area. So, for example, let us say that the social wage is $15 an hour at in the lowest cost of living area in the United States. I'm not sure that's right anymore. I'm not even sure that it's a living wage in the most poverty-stricken areas, okay, of the United States. But for the sake of argument, let's say it is. And the social wage might well vary from that a low of that $15 an hour to a high of roughly $30 an hour if you take into account the cost adjustment, for the higher cost of living areas in the United States. Okay, so, as I said, the fringe benefits would include access to Medicare for those who want to work full time and haven't found work available in the private sector. This does not replace unemployment insurance or other programs currently in place. It does not offer jobs in federal programs already legislated. It employs people at federally funded jobs of great public and social value, as defined by local governments, community nonprofits, and the job guarantee participants themselves. To the extent possible, they would be, quote, green jobs, unquote, aimed at healing the environment or enriching the cultural life of local communities. It's fair to say that MMT economists have not agreed on the size of the living wage and would not be agreed on the size of the social wage. In previous years, I've seen job guarantee proposals varying from $8 an hour to more than $15 an hour. Some people, are now advocating a living wage at as high as $24 an hour. Uh, Differences seem to be based on relative degrees of caution about administering too big a shock to retail businesses dependent on relatively low wage workers. Uh, my own view is that the job guarantee wage should begin at $15 an hour, as I just said, in the lowest CPI index SMA area in the United States, and then be adjusted upward based on the ratio of the CPI in an area to the lowest CPI area. I think that would mean that the living JG wage in, let's say, the New York SMSA might be as much as $24 per hour. I haven't actually taken the trouble to go to the CPI and actually compute what those would be, but that's off the top of my head, and I think that's probably pretty accurate, in the ballpark anyway. This would have a heavy impact on retail businesses, but my view is that businesses who need to pay less than a living wage for their employees to stay in business aren't viable private sector organizations and should not survive. If some businesses in this category have great social value, then they can survive by using that social value to seek help from nonprofit community organizations who can assign employees in the job guarantee program to help those businesses. So that's the way out of that problem. Job guarantee would not be implemented for a few months after the start of the first two programs. I guess I mentioned about four programs. After the start of the four programs just above, to give them a chance to lower unemployment. After their impact is felt, the job guarantee would be implemented as a mop-up operation, most probably at about oh, uh, let's say an average of maybe $55,000 annually per job, including fringe benefits um, 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 and administrative costs. That would probably apply to the final 10 million people still unemployed after the impact of the first two measures is felt. The job guarantee program would be a deficit spending program in instances where full employment, did not exist. Since the private sector would be hiring off the JG rolls and shrinking the size of the JG as the economy heated up, I estimate that it would inject about, I don't know, maybe 400 billion into the private sector over a year's time. The program would produce and maintain full employment, defined as everyone who wants a full-time job at a living wage can get a job offer during and after the first year, of implementation of the program. Next, we could guarantee annual entitlement spending without regard to, quote, trust fund, unquote, the balances. We can't look at Social Security and other entitlements in isolation. We have to win the fight for FDR's Economic Bill of Rights and for an expansion of all the entitlements in the American social safety net, now the stingiest, most inadequate safety net among modern industrial nations. FDR's strategy for justifying Social Security was great for the 1930s when we were still on the gold standard. But nearly 80 years later, it's time to move on. I guess it's more like 90 years later now. It's time to move on to his Economic Bill of Rights as our justification for entitlements and stop reinforcing the idea that it's only an entitlement if one pays for it. It's time to stand on the overriding moral argument. It's time to say that when a nation like the United States can afford to implement these rights, as the United States has been able to do since 1971 when we went off the gold standard, they then are human rights that must be implemented as part of the public purpose. Let us have a Green New Deal with a stronger social safety net, including greatly increased payments for Social Security, for Medicare for All, or a national health service, and a job guarantee emphasizing green jobs. We could also, going on to the next policy, we could also implement the health insurance system. There are many MMT writers who support the Medicare for All system, some who want national health service. Either way, it would be full coverage, no co-pays, no deductible program. HR 676, John Conyers' old bill, was very simple to understand, was a 35-page piece of legislation. Pramila Jayapal's newer bill, I've forgotten, the number. It's something like HR 1976, but I think the 76 at the end of that bill is wrong. It got a 4-digit number. Anyway, both were good bills. Some people think, the Jayapal bill, is actually better. I'm not so sure, but I don't, want to discuss this, at this time. With the $100 trillion coin there would be no need to build in a tax to fund this program. We also should mention this program is going to result in tremendous overall savings in total healthcare expenditure in this country, perhaps as much as 50% of a saving, since we currently are nearing $4 trillion a year in total healthcare spending. If we implement this, it would be looking at less cost. Of course, the cost isn't very significant when you're sitting there with $100 trillion in the Treasury spending account. Of course, we have to fix the infrastructure, of the United States. My proposal would be to fix it over 5 years at $600 billion per year. In other words, a $3 trillion infrastructure bill, I think that could probably fix the infrastructure. I want to end the housing crisis. There's a very good proposal offered by Warren Mosler in 2009. I have a proposal. It looks back to what was done in 2008, 2009, and 2010. I guess I'm not going to do this proposal. It's too long. Suffice it to say that Okay, it would be costly. It would be more of a debt jubilee. But the nice thing about it is that it takes into account the wholesale mortgage frauds that we saw in 2008, 2009, 2010, and also lays the groundwork for getting the people who committed those frauds to pay for what they did at that time. These policies, which among others in the areas of increasing entitlement benefits, education, creating a sustainable environment, and ending climate change, can all be implemented once we have austerity politics out of the picture. Their effects will solve the problems mentioned and, just as importantly, reverse the growth of inequality in America by shoring up the economic security of the middle class and the poor, and I might add the old as well, and restoring economic opportunity. In addition, the job guarantee and infrastructure programs will enrich our stock of public goods and our supply of public and community services. The policies that we can implement once, quote, how are we going to pay for it, unquote, and austerity politics are gone due to using high value platinum coin seniors can create a Green New Deal for America and restore the promise of American democracy to our children and grandchildren. Certainly, that possibility is worth the cost of pushing for high value platinum coin seniorage now rather than waiting for a slow process of education, creating political and social change to create the conditions needed to get bills passed to allow the Treasury to fill the public purse when it needs to deficit spend what Congress has already appropriated. So, to emphasize that, high value platinum coin seniorage is up to one man. It's up to the President of the United States. It isn't up to anybody else. He can order the Secretary of the Treasury to mint that coin. The coin is legal tender and will have to be accepted by the Federal Reserve. Finally, if there's a challenge to the coin, that challenge will probably prove to be impractical as soon as the Treasury begins paying off the public debt with the proceeds from that coin. The damage, quote unquote, done by the platinum coin will not be easily undone, even by a court that is as hostile to the people as the Supreme Court we have now. But also, the minting of the coin and the pursuing of the policies that I have stated here will increase the popularity of this administration by an order of magnitude. And it will be very difficult to fight that popularity among the public once they see the freedom that the platinum coin can bring to the legislature, when those who don't want to do nice things for the people don't have the austerity excuse anymore. That is the essential point. Do you want to have these nice things done for all of us? If you do, let's start lobbying, let's start demanding that high value platinum coin seniorage, the $100 trillion coin or higher, be implemented right now. So, D,
Yes.
do you have any comments?
I am just so waiting for them to get going with what you're talking about, Joe. Let's get on the ball. I mean, we're on the ball. They need to get on the ball.
Well, what do we
Information.
do to make them get on the ball?
I don't know, Joe, because you keep talking about it and talking about it, and I think more people have to talk about it. Or do we have to write to our Congress people that don't listen to us?
Yes, I think more people have to start talking about it, but I think we also need help from the MMTers who are currently advocating for the $1 trillion coin. The $1 trillion coin is small ball. It is not a game changer. It is not enough. I know what motivates the $1 trillion coin game, and that is, being moderate. The president has been forced into a situation where he has to do something to solve the debt ceiling crisis without cutting any benefits for people. So he can mint the $1 trillion coin. And even though that $1 trillion coin might be basically used up, its benefit might be used up within 6 months, that's all right because he can mint another $1 trillion coin. And then he can mint another $1 trillion coin as long as the Republicans keep on being obstreperous. And maybe the president, at the end of that series of minting of $1 trillion coins, will be able to persuade the Republicans to stop this game and to just repeal the debt ceiling law for good. So then what happens? I think that what happens is that we forget about the $1 trillion coin and we just continue to issue debt instruments. Okay. Now, as MMT people, we know that that's not a problem. It's not a fiscal problem. We know that the size of the debt does not matter from a purely fiscal point of view. We know that the size of the debt to GDP ratio doesn't matter from a fiscal point of view. But these things still matter from a political point of view. If this is the course of events, if this is what happens, we're still going to get the debt of terrorism arguments. We're going to still get people saying, oh, we owe so much. We owe so much.
So we can't do our job.
So we can't do what we would like to do for the people because this debt is still hanging over us. And the $1 trillion coins, are not allowing us to get rid of the debt. And so they continue the debt terrorism. Now, I know that we can make this seem silly over the next 10 years. But for God's sake, people, we don't have 10 years. We've got to meet the climate emergency now. And we have to have the money to meet it now. And we have to shut up the debt terrorists now. And we have to get them out of Congress now. And to do that, we need to be serious about high value platinum coin seigniorage. We also need to be serious about dumping the corruption as we propose here 3 nights per week. But apart from dumping the corruption, extremely constructive thing to do would be to remove the basis of austerity by minting the $100 trillion coin.
Oh,
So
I agree with you 100%. Yeah, you just get so tired of all the games and this game playing. It's constant. People are suffering. Action needs to be happening now. Like Kay Ryan in Ohio, what she's going through, and there are so many K's across the country.
yeah, that was outrageous when they started cutting SNAP benefits with an austerity justification. That's outrageous for a nation that's a monetary sovereign to do that. It's a crime.
It is a crime. There's no need for that.
So, how do we manage to make our MMT colleagues more aggressive? How do we get them to be less concerned about how they're going to look to the mainstream press
Well,
and more concerned about trying to develop some pressure from the people on this government that doesn't care about us?
it just seems a lot of people with MMT listen to Steve Grumbine. Now, if there's somebody that's in good communication with Steve Grumbine and they can have a conversation with him, and if he understood the point of view and got behind it, he has his following.
Yes, but I don't think that Steve is going to get behind this because uh, he generally goes along with the MMT professionals from the university community, and he generally agrees with what they have to say, and he pushes that. And I don't think he's going to go for this, okay, as a result.
Who at the universities? I mean, who needs to understand this? Who should we communicate with?
Okay, first of all, there's nothing they have to understand from an economic or fiscal or mechanical point of view about the coin. What we're disagreeing about is how you proceed with the politics of it. What I'm trying to do is to proceed by getting a mass movement going. What they're trying to do is to get the $1 trillion coin minted. That's the political difference. So it seems to me what they're not taking into account, okay, is the time factor. What we need right now, they're basically still playing a defensive game, looking at the long game in order to get MMT accepted. Uh, I don't think any of us have the time for that.
Right. So, like I said, a mass movement for people to understand about the $100 trillion coin.
Okay, my game plan is basically this: get the $100 trillion coin done. get people to really like the results by passing bills in their interests and for the public purpose. And then once that's going on for 5 or 10 years, then just switch it to overt congressional financing. Have the money for appropriations deposited in the Treasury General Account as at the point of passing the legislation. Then you wouldn't have to resort to platinum coin seigniorage anymore. There's nothing wrong with resorting to it.
Right.
But the point is, when Congress passes appropriations, it should see to it that the money that has to be spent by the federal government to fulfill those appropriations is placed in the Treasury General Account by the Federal Reserve, so that debt never has to be issued. Now, that doesn't mean that debt won't sometimes be issued. If there are reasons to issue debt, to give investors a safe place to park their money or something like that, if it fulfills that kind of policy goal, and that seems to be a justifiable goal to people, then certainly let's do it. Okay. But let's be clear that the money for appropriations isn't coming from that debt. That the money for appropriations is coming from the order of Congress to the Federal Reserve itself. Let's make clear that's very visible to people, that they know that their government, a monetary sovereign, is creating the money necessary to fund, in a very common sense way of fund, their programs. This all has to be very transparent. You shouldn't have to have a PhD, in economics to know what's going on to ensure that the Treasury can spend appropriations. To have it be as non-transparent as it is right now is an insult to democracy. And on those grounds, we need to end it and make it all very visible and very direct as to how things are funded.
Oh, yes, we definitely do.
Okay, so that's my pitch on that. Let's go over comments. Okay, Lana asks me to leave the link to my book on the coin. Okay, I'll go back and get that link now. Sorry, folks, this will take a minute. Okay. I should have put the link in the description, I know, but I was remiss in not actually doing that. Hey, this is the only full-length book on the platinum coin right now. It is an ebook, but it is a full length book. Okay. I'm putting the link in the comments. Okay, fixing a debt without breaking America. That tells the story. Here's another link. To my website. Well, all of my 7 ebooks, okay, on MMT are are described. So there is that also. So Kay asks, "Are you sick, Joe?" No.
Oh, I guess because you coughed before.
Oh, you mean because I coughed before? Oh, yeah. No, my throat was just dry. Now, as far as I know, Kay, I am tip top. All my recent tests say that I am tip top. So, no, I am not sick. Bonnie is not sick. We're both doing very well. We held a jewelry show here in the building today, and I lifted a bunch of heavy stuff in order to get it downstairs. But thank you for asking. But I am in good shape. Okay. So, any other questions or comments? Kay was talking about her snap getting cut, which is awful, of course. Yeah, Greg has been sick the last few days. Uh, he did a lot of work out in the rain and came down with, as Kay says, a cold or something. He's been sick the last 2 days. I think he went to work again today. So maybe he's no longer sick. In which case, hopefully, he will be with us tomorrow, but we will have to wait and see. Kay says we need an income guarantee. So tired of dealing with SNAP and Medicaid. Yes, I agree. Of course, I've advocated giving enough money because I've talked about the social wage. Okay, so the social wage would be a lot more than $15 an hour. A lot more. So I guess we're kind of done with the comments. Uh, So if none of you have any more questions, then I will be saying good night for tonight. I don't believe Greg is having a show tonight, is he, Dee?
Not that I know of, no.
Okay. I'll take a last look at the chat. Yeah, you asked him how he was feeling at 9:41, and there's no answer.
And usually he announces it early enough when he's having a show. So I don't think he's having one tonight.
No, I don't think so either. I think he's probably just getting himself some sleep. So I'm going to say goodbye for tonight. Tomorrow I will be back with what was to have been Wednesday's show. Hopefully, we won't have any technical glitch about that. Anymore.
Right, I'll be paying attention.
Well, I'll be paying attention too.
Exactly, this kind of thing is like a wake-up call.
There was a wake-up call. Be very, very careful.
Yes.
Be very, very careful about that. So we will be. Solana says, when are we expecting the debt ceiling fight? Oh, the debt ceiling fight is right now. But Kevin McCarthy is in the process of trying to negotiate with Joe Biden right now. Last week, it was announced by our Secretary of the Treasury, Janet Yellen, that we have technically reached the debt ceiling, okay, already, and that she is resorting to special measures to see that all the bills are paid. So we are already juggling, and we are having a debt ceiling fight, okay, right now. It's another faux fight. It's a faux fight in the sense that the president has the power to mint a platinum coin large enough to end debt ceiling fights for good. But he won't use it. He refuses to use it. But Janet Yellen refuses to use it. She blames it on the Federal Reserve, who she says won't accept the coin. In previous programs, I have pointed out that the president has the power to force the chair of the Federal Reserve to accept the coin.
Yes, and that's where I heard it from you.
Yes. Right, but this is agreed upon also by Rowan Gray and the other MMTers. We all agree that from a legal point of view, that the Fed must accept the coin if it is deposited by the Treasury. So, as so much else, it's in Biden's hands. He cannot be stopped by the Congress from minting this coin. The Fed cannot even go to court about it. Because the language is so clear in the law that where the judgments of the Treasury Secretary and the Fed disagree on monetary matters, on matters of interpretation of the monetary system, that the opinion of the Secretary of the Treasury will be controlling. That's in the law. Plain language of the law. I don't think the Fed has any way of reinterpreting that. Okay, Lana asked, did anyone ask Jay Powell? I don't know if anyone asked Jay Powell whether he would accept it. Maybe some reporter will ask Jay Powell whether he would accept it or not. If he says, no, I will not accept it, then the next move should be by the president. That is, the coin should be minted and should be deposited. And along with that, there should be a letter sent to the Secretary of the Treasury citing the law, saying, I'm sorry, to the chairperson of the Fed, citing the law and pointing out that the Secretary of the Treasury believes that he needs, as the sole banking agent of the Treasury Department, that he needs to credit that coin because it is legal tender. And that if for some reason he does not want to credit it, then he needs to resign and make way for someone who will. By the way, the Federal Reserve would lack standing to go to the Supreme Court in this instance. I've outlined that argument in my book. I've outlined why the Secretary, not the Secretary of the Treasury, but the chairperson of the Fed would lack standing to contest this in court. So, I think that's all for tonight. Hope you have a very good night.
Colby.
Huh?
Yeah, Colby's crying here.
Oh, Colby's crying. Okay. Okay, sorry, Colby. Okay, good night, everybody.
And good night.
We love you too, Kate. Bye. So how was I?
You always do great. Listen, I got some kind of message from Kaiser, but